I'll be honest, visual novels are not my type of game. Sitting down and reading text box after text box just doesn't grab me like it can for others. Maybe that's due to some lack of imagination on my part, or maybe I need the impending sense of doom that I could die at any moment and lose all my progress to keep me engaged.
Am I dead? Is that me dead? Oh, and you thought it was all oh.
Even looking at my bookshelf, none of these books are works of fantasy or fiction, it's all philosophy and political theory. Aside from PDFs of Berserk or Homestuck that I'm on and off reading, the closest thing you'll come to fiction is Camus or Plato, who use stories to present their philosophical worldview. Now, I'm not saying that story games aren't my cup of tea. In fact, I think a strong narrative is often one of the largest draw factors a game can have on me. I'm saying that sitting down and reading a novel instead of experiencing it in the driver's seat for myself is my preferred method of storytelling. Purgatory was my first visual novel game. Before playing, I'd never really delved into any text-based games, and since then the closest I've come to playing another is Disco Elysium and Milk Inside a Bag of Milk Inside a Bag of Milk. So for Purgatory to stand out as one of my favourite games in a catalogue so fundamentally different from it should really say a lot about how great this experience is. Purgatory is a free-to-play visual novel, developed and published by Darwin Hio, better known as Niv. Niv's been pretty active online since the early 2010s, creating a range of games, writings, music and art, gaining an extensive portfolio of works prior to Purgatory. Starting development in the latter half of 2010s, with the prototypes being released in December 2018, a demo was released on the 22nd of April 2019, and then ultimately releasing the full game onto Steam on the 23rd of August 2021. Described by the creator as a slice-of-death visual novel about making friends, cracking cat puns, and waiting for eternity to pass, Purgatory is as incredible as it is empty. The game follows a retro 2D point-and-click structure, with the main storytelling device coming from your interactions with other characters. Now, if you're not a fan of point-and-click games, 4-ish hours of scrolling through text might sound like actual hell to you, but trust me when I say this, these characters are written unbelievably well. The strength of any good visual novel should be in its characters. To create a compelling story, you must first make your player care about these individuals within the story. It's strikingly obvious that Niv has had a history with writing. You can check out his website to see more. With what I can only describe as a Toby Fox-like, casual light-hearted style, but still very distinctly his own, and a manner of characterizing I've failed to find in any other media. I genuinely found myself laughing out loud at some of these dialogue interactions and so wrapped up in the story that the playtime only felt like 2 hours at most, even though I'd sunk 5 hours into my first playthrough. Pair this with an outstanding OST, fitting the unusually upbeat tone of the afterlife, and you get one of the best games I've played, ever. Before I get into the main part of this video, which is the story, I'm issuing a heavy spoiler warning. Honestly, go play this game. It's free on Steam and will only take you like 3 hours to play, granted you don't get lost in the hallways. I genuinely think I'm incapable of navigating Purgatory correctly, even when looking at a map. This game is best experienced with no prior knowledge, so please pause this video and go play it, but make sure you come back to watch this. And with all that said, this is Purgatory, the best visual novel you've never played. The game begins with you posthumously waking up in a waiting room. After a discussion with Charon, the receptionist for this place, you're made to sign a document with pronouns? Holy shit, do not let Jordan Peterson see this game. Charon comments that Purgatory is over capacity, but doesn't clarify further, and you enter the portal in front of you. The first thing you'll notice is that Purgatory itself is the same white, bleak style as the room before it. The only colours come from the characters you meet. The first of which is Kyung-soon. The whitewashed background adds to this feeling of being trapped, being cold and uncaring, mirroring how most of us view death. It also gives a precedent to the coloured-in characters. This juxtaposition could show how that the real connections you'll create along your story are to the people and not the place. Kyung-soon presents herself as standoffish and reluctant to speak, but if you enter a nearby library, you'll encounter Oliver. He's more willing to discuss with you and shows you the collection of books Purgatory has to offer. Every single page of every single book is nothing but the word meow, printed over and over. Oliver's slightly obsessive nature begins to show here. as he explains he's in the process of reading and cataloguing every book, in hopes of finding a pattern or a code hidden in them. Delighted by your interest in the books, he lets you check one out as you leave. Kyung-soon, our hyena from earlier, asks if she can have the book to eat. Confused, you hand it over, and she does just that. This is much to the dismay of Oliver, who confronts Kyung-soon and manages to get it back after a short argument. This reveals a key that Kyung-soon has, which allows you to unlock the door and further progress into Purgatory. This section is a lot more expansive than the last, with a large garden and many corridors, all illustrated in the same familiar white style. However, in this garden we encounter Numa, engrossed in her yard work. She's closed off and quiet until you almost step on a tulip, at which she yells at you, expressing how difficult it is to make them grow in Purgatory. It's possible to find out more about her as long as you ignore basic morale. This is done by taking a screwdriver to a vent cover and crawling in. Here you'll find Numa's room, covered with tally marks and a depiction of Kyung-soon. By reading Numa's diary, you learn that her infatuation with the hyena and the anxiety around taking action on it. Numa herself catches you in the act of snooping, and after scolding you, elaborates on what you found. She confirms her feelings for Kyung-soon, and depressingly clarifies that the tally marks are how long she's been in Purgatory. You will be able to help her eventually, but for now you apologise and you carry up along the staircase. After managing to navigate the nearly impossible hallways, you find two new characters to interact with, Sean and Elijah. Through a conversation speculating on how you each ended up in Purgatory, these two show a lot of personality. Sean is very confident and outgoing, frequently hitting on the player and just about anyone around him. Elijah presents as more withdrawn but still willing to engage, and excited to discuss poetry with you. It's explained that following a game of hide and seek, the Meowseum of Purgatory has been locked, and Elijah tasks you with finding a code to get back in, the code being 1234. Upon making it into the museum, Sean immediately shatters a statue of a Maine Coon. The dialogue sequence following really characterized Sean for me, as he admits to reading Reddit regularly whilst alive. More importantly, plot-wise, he mentions his partner that he left behind. Via the Meowseum, you can enter into the back rooms of Purgatory, which is where we meet Tori, an owl fixated on busting out of the afterlife. She enlists you to help on her mission, and detective-style leaves to hunt for clues. I chose to try and start Natalie's quest first, because she's easily one of my favourite characters. You find her up in the attic in her bedroom, asleep, and after waking her up, you can talk to her. You crack some jokes together, but notice a stack of books being used to uphold her coffee table. Remembering Oliver's great protectiveness over these, you promise Natalie you'll hang out later, but return the books to Oliver and his library. As you do this, the business card of Lucifer himself falls out of one. You pocket this, the devil can come later. For now, it's time to befriend more of the Purgatory residents. You can find Tori in the garden, with her hunt for clues leading her to dig a massive hole in the ground. This is much to the displeasement of Numa, and the two argue in front of you. Tori eventually gives up, and apologises for damaging the garden. Following that, you can go and meet up with Sean at the cat piano. Unfortunately, the batteries are dead, and you end up having to look for batteries. It's times like these where a walkthrough can be helpful, because, as I've said before, getting around this place is very confusing. Your effort is all worth it though, because playing a duet with Sean is what gets him to finally open up to you. He tells you about his still living partner, Danny, and fondly recalls their bond built off of music. It's a sweet moment that's immediately ruined by Tori, who tells you to be quiet because she's working on something. Tori's great task, if you're wondering, is messing with an electrical box in the closet. You end up roped in to help, but you're similarly bad at it, and end up cutting out the electricity for all of Purgatory. Stuck in the dark, you can find a candle in Natalie's bedroom and use that to help you reconnect the wirings. You repair the lights, but this isn't the end of Tori's mission for you. The quest escapade gets more reckless, as she now manages to talk you into being tied to a rope and lowered into the bottomless void of Purgatory. Reluctantly, you're sent further and further into darkness, until a dreaded snapping sound rings out. The rope has failed you, and a million questions about whether it's possible to die again flood your brain. You plummet slightly, but the respite comes in the form of your safety harness. You're saved, somehow. After you've been pulled away from certain death, many apologies are given, and you find yourself sitting by an unopenable door, discussing. There's something poetic about this, with the ever-determined Tori finally sitting down beside a door no one has ever been able to open. The past sequence of events have been a turning point, with the owl realizing her relentless quest to find some higher meaning and a way out of here is upsetting and even almost hurting her friends. Her character arc concludes here, and she's unironically freer now than she was before. Purgatory's strengths lie within its characters, but unlike most games, the character arcs aren't completed conventionally, often subverting players' expectations to a more logical and healthy conclusion than the character just gaining what they want and moving on to the next task. When you follow a character's questline to the end, you'll be met with a black screen where you can fill in information about your past life, and just so you know when you've completed that character's questline, their face gets coloured in on the options menu. From the moment we meet Tori, she's very overt with her need to be in control. Even in death, she strategizes a plan to escape her fate. Her need for control ends up trapping her even more, caught in a trap of regulating her surroundings. When asked what her 3 biggest regrets are in life, she states dying is one of them. We also learn that Tori died from being struck by lightning whilst walking home from work. The chances of this are so ridiculously low that it's almost morbidly humorous that she was killed by such a random circumstance. After Tori exhausts all of her options trying to open the unopenable door, she just sits there. While yes, it's clear she's burnt herself out, I think there's a bit more to say about her decision. When people face burnout, and I say this from experience, many of us just try to keep pushing, to keep trying and ultimately setting ourselves up for even greater failure. But this isn't what Tori does. She gives herself time to relax, to heal, recognizing that not every problem can be overcome through brute force. Tori doesn't give up out of spite. She understands that what she's doing is only harming more, and takes a much healthier path forwards. Elijah is waiting for you in the Meowseum and talks about how he held a poetry slam once. Much to his disappointment, nobody really seemed to enjoy it. You suggest trying again with an everything slam, so that more people could join in. Elijah likes this idea, so while he sets it up, you run around and invite all the characters. All agree excitedly, except for Sean. He seems a little reluctant, likely still hung up on your discussion about Danny earlier. Through some persuasion, a comfortable solution can be reached. Sean joins the slam and agrees to play a song for his lost partner. He seems excited again, and with the final person invited, you ring the bell and can begin the slam. Sean playing the song at the slam is a key moment for him, as it's truly his coming to peace with the fact that he's left his life behind, and using his passion for music to help him. Alongside this, Elijah reads a poem about his military service, to people who are genuinely his friends, something he lacked in his pre-purgatory life. This act of expression is helpful for both of them, and both of their arcs are finished. Sean's character focuses mostly on his love of music, and his partner, Danny, he left behind. These two aspects of him are deeply intertwined, as he reveals he met his partner at his sister's record store. A lot of his life was controlled by his carefree attitude we see him almost continuously display, describing a life of failing academically and sleeping around. He's still determined when it comes to things he cares for. However, he grew up in a small town in Philadelphia, with only 17 people graduating his class. Following being outed as gay to his school and his family, he was able to move out at 18 and later get an apartment with Danny, despite it being difficult financially. Throughout the game, the topic of Danny seems to be the only topic that can break him out of his cocky persona, instead sending him to a melancholic demeanor as he's reminded of what he's left behind. His character arc is fulfilled when you, the player, convince him to write and perform a song dedicated to Danny at the Everything Slam. By creating and sharing the song, Purgatory Blues, Sean comes to terms that he's not lost the only other thing that he's ever been passionate about: music. Throughout Purgatory's narrative, Elijah remains reserved and a rule follower. This can be best evidenced through his poem and his discussion of his time in the military, only enlisting because his friends did too. With Sean and the other members of Purgatory, Elijah acts as the straight man, usually logical and calm, but not to the point of obsession as we see in Tori and Oliver, though this doesn't mean he is without flaw. His biggest flaw is his inaction due to fear, fitting him to be a pangolin, an animal that curls up in a ball to protect themselves against predators in the real world. Elijah tells us about his dreams of being a sailor or a teacher, but both passed him by as he remained the passenger seat for most of his life. During the Everything Slam, Elijah comes out of his shell, or his ball, and opens up to people. He lets his guard down and pursues his interest in poetry, overcoming the fear he once held about external criticism. People seem to be bonding with each other more heavily now, and Elijah takes a keen interest on Numa's gardening, which she's happy to show him. When you follow them to the garden, Numa begins to finally open up to you regarding her infatuation with Kyung-soon. Together you arrange a plan for Numa's confession, with flowers, a poem, and food as gifts. Through a mini-game, you help Numa pick out the perfect flowers, and Elijah offers you to spend time with Numa, creating the perfect poem. While they're collaborating, you decide it's best to spend time with another character. Confronting Oliver in the library prompts him to show you an anomaly in his studies. Through millions of meows, there's a typo, a single word saying meowp. This sends Oliver into an obsessive state, determined to discover the meaning of the typo. He withdraws into his study, where he works continuously on the newfound discovery. After some talking with Tori, you both go to Oliver's study to check up on him. His obsession over discovery has driven him into overworking himself, desperate to find the hidden meaning he spent his purgatory sentence searching for. With compassion for your friend, you try to leave and find some orange soda to help him chill out. In the kitchen though, it seems like there's only one cup in all of purgatory, and this dickhead cat has just broken in front of you. So, empty-handed, you return to check on Oliver, only to discover he's entirely burnt out, asleep on his desk. You can choose to tuck a blanket over him, and on your way out you clumsily knock over a pot of pens. Oliver awakens again, straight back to this hyper-stressed state. You go on a walk together, and Oliver opens up to you, divulging in his deep fear of being wrong, and his entire life being spent overworking himself. He breaks down into tears to you, and accepting that the books he slaved over do mean nothing. He takes a stack of his beloved library books, and leaves them for Kyung-soon to consume and destroy, signifying to him that he can let it all go, and at last be over. Oliver finally allows himself to sleep properly, and his arc is complete. Oliver is immediately presented as shy and uptight, with a desire for order and protectiveness over the books. His need for order even stretches to his presentation of himself to others, outright refusing to discuss sensitive topics near the start of the game due to fear of breaking down, and being seen as anything less than perfect and in control. Through the game we see his obsessive and stubborn demeanour as he works himself to exhaustion over the meaningless books in the library, determined there's some sort of meaning to the typo he finds. This is why his ending is so satisfying. His arc finishes with him admitting that there's no true meaning to the books. He learns to let go of his obsessions and can start self-improvement, even post-death. Both Tori and Oliver's stories can be completed by helping them realize that sometimes their goals are set too high, and teaching them to accept defeat and find comfort in what they already have. Sometimes there is truly no way out or no higher meaning to things. Now that Oliver has been put to rest, it's time to check back in on Numa. Food is the only thing left to sort, and a brief conversation with Kyung-soon reveals that her odd diet not only includes books, but leaves. You go to check in on Natalie, and she invites you to come and walk around the art block, a series of hallways people scribble on. You draw together, with Natalie illustrating a cat character. Tori happens to be passing by at this moment, and excitedly recognizes the character. In life, Natalie was a webcomic artist, and this is, in fact, one of the characters from her webcomic. By sheer coincidence, Tori, an avid fan of the webcomic, has ended up in purgatory with the author herself. Their shouty, ecstatic conversation seems to deeply inspire Natalie. You both head to her room and continue hanging out, and Natalie laments about never finishing her comic. A combination of writer's block and an early death dashed her plans to do so. Tori's pure enthusiasm has re-sparked the light in her. However, Natalie shares her plans to carry on the comic in her afterlife, even if it's just for one fan. Reinvigorated with creative spirit, Natalie's arc is done. Natalie is by far my favourite character. She's literally me. This is my Ryan Gosling. So much so that I ripped off her design and name for my Space Station 14 character. Natalie remains laid back and passive to a situation in purgatory, acting as the foil character to Tori. Like myself, because she's literally me, Natalie has grown apathetic to the things she used to enjoy, such as her webcomic Nocturnal, which funny enough Tori is a fan of. Natalie falls into the trap many of us do, thinking that everything we create must be bigger and better than the last, as if our creative output can grow exponentially. But in the end, this drive can be self-sabotaging, making us devalue our work and place higher and higher standards, eating ourselves alive by the need to beat our past self. This artificial competition Natalie creates for herself has led to a loss of passion, and resulted in her leaving Nocturnal unfinished. By getting outside input from Tori, she shifts her view of art back from being an undefeatable task to light-hearted fun drawing on the corridor walls. Natalie is able to break down the barriers she's set for herself and reignite the spark of creativity she's once lost, pledging to carry on work on Nocturnal even in the afterlife. You can now return to Numa, who's filled with apprehension, but finally ready. Awkwardly, she approaches Kyung-soon and begins the confession. Midway through, Oliver enters and throws off the already shaky profession of love. Embarrassed, Numa runs away and hides in her vent, too ashamed to leave or speak. You encourage Kyung-soon to go and try and fix it, and she leaves her spot for the first time in the game. Their conversation goes well, and for the rest of the game, you can find them sitting and talking together in various parts of the map. And with that, our final 2 character arcs have been completed. The biggest section of Numa's character development comes through her romance with Kyung-soon, though I argue a much larger change happens within the background. When first meeting Numa, she's heavily reserved, staying in her shell. Get it? In her shell? But as the game progresses, she becomes much more open with you and those around her, which is why the motif of flowers and plants is so interlinked with Numa's character. The stem grows slowly, with taking little notice of its growth, much like Numa's interactions with those around her, until the bulb bursts, sprouting out a flower, that being Numa and Kyung-soon's relationship. Following on with this metaphor, Numa's distress over you treading on a tulip she managed to grow at the beginning of the game could act as a representation of her journey, relying on you to aid her in gathering flowers, food, and writing the poem, of which you agree to, not stamping on her flower. Although it may not be apparent at first, Kyung-soon has some of the best character development throughout the game. When you first meet her, she is passive to the world around her, just waiting out her time on the path of least resistance. During the game, Kyung-soon mentions her transphobic parents, and we can theorize that this is where her apathetic and nonchalant personality likely stems from. Her environment led her to internalizing that she has no power to change the cruel and indifferent world she lives in. This deep sense of powerlessness causes apathy, to grow passive and to go on with life, rather than to try and seek out or make a change to your surroundings. However, once Numa's confession goes horribly wrong, she takes action to go and comfort Numa. Through Kyung-soon's relationship with Numa, we see much more of her personality shine through the thick shell she once protected herself with. By taking control of her life, Kyung-soon learns that her life can be whatever she creates it to be, rather than sitting in the metaphorical passenger seat and simply watching it all go by. Both of their arcs are now completed, and with that you can get the true ending. Remember that calling card for the devil? Slowly, you dial the number and let it ring. Nobody picks up. More seconds pass, and the cat that's been living in purgatory transforms before you. Here he is, the overlord of purgatory, Lucifer. He gathers everyone forcibly into the main room and explains the true cruelty of your situation. Purgatory is overcapacity by 1 member, and as a result, one of you gets to move on to heaven. Only one of you though. He states he'll interview you one by one and see who's most worthy of ascension. As your friends are taken away and grilled, plans and desperate bargains begin to spring up. Everything falls futile. Finally, you go in, and it's explained that you will not be leaving purgatory. You're still new and you must serve your time. Lucifer does kindly congratulate you with what you've done here. Making everyone interact and be friends wasn't easy, yet here they are, facing a key moment of their afterlives, but joking about it. Just outside those doors, your new friends are terrified, but laughing together, because you showed them how. Lucifer and you re-enter the main room now. He delivers his judgment, everyone gets to go to heaven, apart from you. There's celebration, and then there's anger. Your friends begin to demand you be allowed to go to heaven with them. Kyung-soon points out something. There's no real logical reason for you to stay. Lucifer inhabits these halls alone. Odds are he's quite lonely. He doesn't need you to stay for some important purifying of the soul reason. He just doesn't want to be alone. Faced with this truth, he concedes, and lets you go too. You and your friends go through into the reception, and up on into heaven. Upon entering heaven, the immediate juxtaposition is apparent. The background is now luscious and full of colour, happily replacing the cold whiteness of the purgatory halls. We first meet Kyung-soon and Numa in an edible garden. sitting down and looking at the flowers, as they both were at the beginning of the game, but this time, they're together. As Numa swoons over the new flowers, Kyung-soon reluctantly tries them. We learn that this is just the entry hall to heaven. Our final destination is just a quick walk away, but for now we have a brief respite to talk to everyone. Moving forwards, you enter a library where you can find Oliver and Natalie. You discuss the bittersweet feeling of your journey coming to an end with Oliver, a sentiment I definitely shared whilst playing through Purgatory. Natalie is engrossing colouring sheets and offers you to join her. Sadly, you decline. While you plan on reaching heaven, Natalie preferred to take her time exploring. Progressing out of the library, you encounter Elijah and Sean, looking into the clouded beyond. Elijah notes the weight lifted off of his shoulders, making it to heaven, and how it may inspire a new poem. Sean, in celebration, tells you about Joe Whittaker, a street preacher who would berate Sean for his homosexuality, ingraining Sean with the idea that he would never make it to heaven. But look who's laughing now, Joe Whittaker. Crossing the bridge, you meet Tori in a grand hall, where she asks you how you're holding up, and tells you that heaven is lucky to gain an angel like you. Then, the gate, the final threshold. Passing through here ends your journey, and takes you from Purgatory. I'm not an emotional person, but this option hurts, like it deeply hurts. As the gate opens, your screen is engulfed with white light, and title card. While the credits roll, we're treated to a Midwest emo rendition of Sean's song, Purgatory Blues. To the side of the credits, we see the cast of Purgatory living in heaven. Oliver, deep in study and playing chess with Tori. Natalie continuing to work on Nocturnal and sharing with others. Sean performing music and sunbathing alongside Elijah, and Numa and Kyung-soon eating together. Purgatory is a short game, but in that short period, it packs a powerful message. My interpretation is that it's never too late to make change. All of the characters in Purgatory go through significant personal changes in their afterlife. During what was supposed to be the end of their lives, they continue to grow and develop and overcome what held them back during their mortal lives. I think a lot of people, especially young people like myself, fall into the sunk cost fallacy, making an irrational decision to keep pushing through something that just doesn't work because it gives you familiarity, and subconsciously you tell yourself that if you call it quits now, you're giving up or you are too weak to carry on. It takes a strong person to recognize and admit the situation they're in is not working, and an even stronger person to make change to improve their life. If you push through just to become a shell of your former self, is that sacrifice really worth it? Though it may not feel like it, our lives are constantly changing and shifting. There's never a static moment of being. So you might as well constantly change and shift towards a better future for yourself. Easier said than done, I'm aware, but knowing when and how to change for the better is a virtue. I hope you've all enjoyed, and again, I implore you to play Purgatory. I have been Unajoy, and you have been